Are we responsible for the consequences of our actions? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is the podcast arm of Viri Christi. Viri Christi is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help young men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at verichristi.com. This is episode 18 of our Introduction to Moral Theology. All right, fellas, the question before us today is, are we responsible for the consequences of our actions? Now, last week, we discussed freedom of the will, okay, whether our choices are determined or our wills are free, what's the proper understanding of freedom, and then what are some of the implications of that for our moral lives. This week, we're going to talk about one of the implications of the fact that we're free is that we're responsible for what we do. Okay, so we're going to talk about what's the unity of responsibility and freedom, what sort of factors can mess with our freedom. That'll be a look forward to what we're going to talk about next week. So I'm going to develop that more next week, introduce it this week, develop it next week, and then some practical takeaways, how to become more free so that the responsibility we have for actions are positive things, right? We're getting positive outcomes. All right, let's just launch into it. There's a word called imputable. Okay, so the word imputable refers to actions that can be ascribed, attributed, or linked to a specific person or entity. Okay, oh my gosh, why would I go through that long definition? The consequences of your actions are imputable to you. They're ascribed to you or attributed to you if you're the one who did them. Okay, so remember last month we talked about the difference between a human act and an act of a human. So an act of a human is something a human does involuntarily. The consequences of those actions are not imputable or attributed to you morally. Okay. So this is kind of a ridiculous example, but let's say the doctor has that little rubber mallet and he taps your knee to make sure your reflexes are good. This is probably not even possible, but let's say he tapped your leg and you swung your leg up and kicked him in the shin. Okay. Would kicking him in the shin be imputable or attributed to you morally? No, because if it was a legitimate reflex, well, you don't have control over that. You didn't think to yourself like, I think I'll kick the doctor in the shin, and I think I'll choose to do it. There's no deliberation. There's no choice. So that action wouldn't be ascribed to you. Now, when you think about what you're going to do, okay, and then you freely choose to do it, you are responsible for the things that come with that. Okay. So responsibility and freedom go hand in hand because our free choices and the actions that result from them help us become the kind of people we are. So we're responsible not only for the outward effects, consequences, which is what we normally think about with our actions, but also how it changes us. So someday when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ, God's going to judge the kinds of people we are, not just the things we did, not just the effects those actions had on other people, but what did it turn us into? Okay. We are responsible for that. All right. Now, the choices, when we make choices, we can will to do something. That's called an act of commission. So I know I say these kind of in a funny technical way, but it's pretty straightforward. Some things you choose to do, right? You just choose to listen to this podcast. That's an act of commission. You can also omit to do things, right? So you can skip mass. Like, well, I'm supposed to go to mass, but I'm just going to skip. Well, those are two ways in which your choices can affect you. The things you commit to do, whether good or bad, have consequences. The things you omit to do, whether good or bad, also have consequences. So when we're talking about freedom, guys, just kind of wrap this part up. We are those consequences of our actions that can be ascribed to us because we actually chose to do them. Okay. Those we are responsible for. Okay. Those actions can either be things we choose to do, say, think, or do, or things we choose to omit, saying, thinking, and doing. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, this freedom, right? This positive quality to choose and do things. Okay. This positive ability to express our humanity or express kind of people we are, to develop the kind of men we are. These can be influenced by factors outside of us and inside of us. Okay. This is what's called the difference between external and internal freedom. Now, external factors can take away or inhibit your freedom. Okay. So if you live in destitution, like supreme poverty, you are not free to do things like pursue an education. Okay. If you guys live in a tyrannical government, Let's say you live in a communist regime. You would not be free to worship. Those are factors that are outside of you that would change your ability, your freedom, mitigate it on what you do. Your responsibility also would follow upon those. Okay. So if you lived in a communist country where they don't where Catholicism is illegal and churches are illegal, if you quote unquote skipped mass on Sunday, you wouldn't be responsible for that because there's something in your culture that's not letting you do it. So God wouldn't be sitting there going, well, you committed mortal sin because you didn't show up to mass on Sunday. No, it might be you can't get there. Okay. So there's things that can happen to us, outside of our control, that take away our ability to make choices. Therefore, we wouldn't be responsible for those things. Okay. And as we'll talk about next week, our responsibility based on these external factors can go up and down too. Okay. There's also things we'll talk a lot about in this podcast, internal factors, okay, that limit our choices. These are things like our feelings, our fears, our addictions, our habits, stuff like that. So when we do things, guys, our life, the choices we make, these are not done in a vacuum, okay? The history of our family, the past decisions we've made, the kind of temperament we have, the kind of personality we have, those sort of factors, they can help us to be more or less free. This is why we do a lot of time with you guys, training you guys to be free, right? Having you guys play sports and do your homework and make your bed in the morning and follow your parents' commandments promptly, go to mass on Sunday. Because what these things do, these good actions, is they make good choices easier to do in the future. So which makes you more free. When you choose to sin and make bad choices, it makes you less free. Okay. So notice freedom and responsibility are coupled together. They go together. Okay. But we have factors of things outside of us and factors inside of us that change how free we are. And so when we're talking in this podcast, guys, about growing up to be the men God wants us to be, we have to recognize those factors outside of us that can help us stay on that journey, and then the things inside of us. And if we can have a good knowledge of ourselves and our circumstances, then we can make good choices on what we should or shouldn't do. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Last thing I'll leave you guys with as we wrap up. There are 3 basic things we can do, and this fits with our rules. This utilizes weekly encouragement to practice our rule. Okay, there's 3 basic things you can do to help you become more free and also then would be more responsible. Okay, first is to make progress in virtue. Okay, you want to grow in those 4 cardinal virtues we've discussed in the past, right? Prudence and justice, and fortitude and temperance. As you make progress in virtue, you become more free to do that which is good. Okay, so making progress in virtue would make you more free and more responsible. So your freedom can allow you to get more rewards in heaven, say. You also need to make progress in your knowledge of what's good. Guys, our ignorance takes our freedom away. So when you are ignorant of something, you're not as free as you can be because you don't know the right thing is to do. So we have to grow in knowledge and wisdom, which is why we have, this podcast for you guys to listen to. Hopefully glean some things off it that are helpful for you. Third is self-discipline, or what we've talked about in here is asceticism. This allows you to get mastery of your will over your other actions. So when you learn to say no to junk food or the temptation to drink alcohol or do drugs, as you say no to those things, as you say yes to things like doing your homework and going to mass and saying your prayers, you become and you master yourself, right? Get more composure and you grow in freedom and responsibility. Guys, if you grow in virtue, you grow in the knowledge of the good and self-discipline, you become more free. If you guys make bad choices and you're becoming more vicious, you're getting to know that which is evil, not what that is which good, and you're gaining less self-discipline. You're getting more uncontrolled. Okay, you're out of control. These things are going to take away your freedom. Okay, and we don't want to do that. So I hope this little lesson was helpful for you guys. Look forward to talk more about this next week as we circle back to this theme, but a little more depth on what sort of factors modify our freedom. So hope you guys have a blessed week. See you next time.